Well, hello and welcome back to Read Becca for a Try a Chapter vlog. So the concept of trying a chapter is just taste testing some books, and I really want to do some of that this year in 2026, more than I have in the past, because I have so many lists everywhere. I also had the idea of kind of doing something like this where exercise or workouts pick my books, but I finally sat down and solidified that up to go ahead and make it very January, start of the new year, health consciousness. Like a lot of New Year's resolutions are driving us toward the gym. So I decided to incorporate that. I'm not big on New Year's resolutions, definitely. So nothing really is significantly changing about my workouts, but I do really want to get in some good, steady workouts regularly. And so I'm going to try to get in for 5 workouts. And I always am the person that goes for the most straightforward way of delivering on these things. So I always go in and do something on a machine that counts for you. And as a result, there are a few different numbers I could select. So I may vary that and I'll tell you if I do, but I think most reasonable is going with just the calorie count, because when I go in, I may be doing a whole long cardio that will give me a fairly high number. I may be just doing a warm up or cool down on the machine and other stuff that's not tracked or counted. And so that machine count will be fairly low. So I think we'll get a good variance in numbers using that. And what I'm going to do is take that calorie count number and apply it to my Goodreads list. Because again, the simplest option and most straightforward option is that. I have many lists, as I said, but the to-read list on Goodreads, I have about 1,600 books on. This is not an actual to read, it's just kind of a reference list for me that I can go back and refer to. But I still want to get to those things and know why I put them on that list. And so I think that's a very good lengthy list that there is no way any of my workouts are going to get up to 1,600 calories, I don't think. But I think we'll get a good variance within that range to try out. So that is what I'm planning to do this week. We will see how it goes. I'm not going to be the person who fully records himself at the gym, but we're doing an arc trainer total leg up and down kind of workout intervals, and I had the idea to use sticky notes that didn't totally work. So you're just going to have to trust that I was not monitoring the number and manipulating it as we went in later workouts. But 454 is our first number. All right, so hopefully I am screen recording my Goodreads. You can see this is my to-read list of 1,613 books. So we have lots to choose from. And you can enable numbering on any of your shelves. It's not on by default in shelves you manually create, but I think the default shelves, like your want to read, currently reading, usually have that enabled, but you can change it in the settings anyway. So regardless, this has numbering already enabled. I already sorted by the number. You can see from my dates added, a lot of these I started in 2012, but took a break basically between 2012 and 2016 because I was barely reading. So things really ramp up around 2016, but a huge number of these have been on my list for a decade plus. So I have stuff I need to be getting to. So we're going to search for our first book, number 454. And I will probably speed this up because it's going to take forever to load, and we will eventually get there. Okay, number 454 is Fall or Dodge in Hell by Neal Stephenson. This is interesting because Stephenson is a favorite author of mine. I really love his books. So they are kind of huge and chunky generally, and I'm quite sure this one is a huge chunky one. And also the title is not Fall or Dodge in Hell. It's Fall or alternate title Dodge in Hell. And Dodge, I believe, is the main character. I also think this is a singularity novel, so like uploading your consciousness, which is interesting. Stephenson writes kind of hard sci-fi mixed with history usually, and is very interesting. So I'm excited to get to this one. Though Stephenson, being a favorite author, I have lots of his books on my shelves to get to that I haven't read, and this is not one of them. So that's quite the conundrum. But I'm always happy to get to one of his books. All right, I finished my first chapter, and I don't intend to do this for all of the books, but I went and got the physical book. It was available sitting on the shelf at my nearby library branch just down the road, so I just ran over and picked it up. So the first chapter was 23 pages, which is a pretty good taste. That's about like what I would hope for in a try chapter, as not overlong and also a decent little sample. This one was really interesting because I feel like I haven't read Stevenson in a while, and just getting the sense of his writing again was so nice. I think that I didn't get a sense of the character quite yet. So we are with Dodge, the main character, starting out. He seems to be in Seattle or somewhere thereabouts. He, at the beginning of this, is laying in bed and hitting the snooze button a whole lot. And so we're getting these real introspective musings about, first, the fact that he can just keep snoozing, and he's like thinking about why they've designed the snooze duration to be what it is, and the fact that he's able to sleep in because he doesn't have to go to work, because he's having a medical procedure later, and he's kind of thinking about how long is passing, whether he's actually getting a good sleep, and then he kind of goes down the route of sleep versus death. So I think that's going to be the main thread, but that he doesn't totally fixate on that right away. He kind of takes that and spins off into death mythos in Greek and Norse traditions. And so we go down a whole rabbit hole of him researching that a little bit. And then he just sort of meanders after that, after getting up. He goes to Pike's Place Market, I think, and picks up some food, and realizes at the end of the chapter that he shouldn't have eaten and wasn't supposed to eat before his medical procedure, but he might as well finish it now, just because. So I'm assuming that's a dun-dun-dun moment, and in fact, that's going to be how he ends up dying, if he does end up dying. I'm still making an assumption about this. But let me read a little chunk for you, because I want you to get a sense for the writing before I talk about it. He felt no particular desire to go back to sleep, for he had been enduring a curiously boring dream whose central plot seemed to be the difficulty of finding coffee. In this dream, he was in the small town in Iowa where he'd grown up. Its landscape and its cast of characters were commingled with places he had been and people he'd encountered during the decades since he'd left it in the rearview mirror of his pickup truck. But the grid street pattern of that town, covering just a few square blocks, and easily mastered by a boy on a bicycle, was, decades later, the spatial lattice in which virtually all of his dreams were constructed. It was the graph paper on which his mind seemed to need to plot things. Okay, so you can tell from that he writes in a way that is really descriptive, yet mundane. It's not over the top, going into drama. And you also, I specifically picked a section that doesn't have a lot of technical jargon, but you can get a sense that there are some underlying technical descriptive elements, and certainly Stevenson is an author that goes into tech details. So I really, really enjoyed trying the chapter, and pretty much when I got to the end of the chapter, I was like, I really just want to keep reading. So I have a really big chunky book here, and I'm trying to read big chunky books right now, but I already have in progress, and I don't know if I want to start another one, but I just really enjoy this. So, yeah, definitely pushes this up in my estimation for when I want to get to it, whether I do keep this borrowed book now, or if I get to it later. Okay, I had a stretch core and arms workout today, so we're just going to do a 5-minute cool down on the machine today. And we have 25. Nice low number. Okay, we are back for number 25. That's a pretty low number. I don't think it's going to be the ancientest TBR. It's going to be in 2016 probably. So very old. Oh. And number 25 is Little Brother by Cory Doctorow. This is very funny, and I feel a little like I'm being called out here, because Cory Doctorow is another favorite author of mine who I have multiple books sitting on my shelf unread, and yet this is a book I don't have. So this one I think is about hackers. This is YA as well. I think one of his only YA books or series. This has 3 books out in it. So from what I hear, that the YA aspect is not really tropeful and is very appealing outside of the YA audience. I also have heard that though it's sort of a hacker story set in a surveillance state, so this is also sci-fi again, I've heard that though that can become quite dated really, really fast, it holds up well. And this is, I think, over 10 years old. Well, definitely over 10 years old because it's been sitting on the TBR. I think this is from like very early 2010s. So I'm very curious about this one because I love how Cory Doctorow writes about the impact of technology on our lives. And this feels especially timely right now. But I don't know. I also feel bad because I literally have a hold on his new nonfiction too to get to. So which to prioritize is a big question. Well, I was able to get the first chapter of Little Brother by just simply doing the read a sample on Libby from my library without having to borrow the book. So that was handy, and it was about 22 pages, so right at what I was hoping for. And I feel like this is different from what I was expecting. Much slower in starting for a thriller kind of book. We're following a teenage boy, and he's kind of just going about his day at school, more or less, but he is a hacker. And so he gets called into the principal's office and is kind of being questioned about this sort of typical hack at school over some study materials and that kind of thing. And he seems sure he didn't do it. So he's kind of pushing back on the people there and knows his rights a little bit more, and I found that really funny. But that's sort of resolved, so that doesn't seem like it's turning into something really, really major. But then also, he's just sort of going about his day at school. He's talking to friends, he is talking about playing a game, which seems most interesting to me, and I feel like that's going to become a bigger element, where there's a virtual reality game that has kind of a puzzle solving and scavenger hunting aspect to it, much like Ready Player One. And so that also, though, didn't feel like quite as big a deal as Ready Player One. It felt much more just like teenagers who play a video game a lot. So nothing was really jumping out as the hook into the story for me. What I think was not a fit for me right now is that with this teenage character who very much is in a casual teen voice when we're reading, and that I think was jarring with the technology aspects because we're getting a lot of explanation, and it didn't feel totally info dumpy, but like you're having to be told about the different technologies that are involved as he's going through his day and doing kind of hackery things. So everything from what Leet Speak is, which I very much don't need an explanation of that, ARFID, this VR game, things like that are all getting sort of explained as we go. And that felt like a lot and very jarring up against the casualness of the character voice. So I feel like for me right now, this is not a fit. And I don't think right now is the time that I would want to continue on with this, though I think it seems like it's going to be a really compelling, interesting book. I'm just kind of bouncing off of it right this moment. So I think onward to whatever we get to in the next clip. Today would normally be an off day for the gym because I am on dog walking duty at the shelter. So that definitely goes beyond just walking and using your body into actual exertion and exercise for sure, because especially with the large dogs, like they can be a real full body effort, and they're very excited about going on walks no matter how many they get per day. So anyway, I was planning to stop by the gym for a cool down after, so I could at least get a number, but I came up with an even better idea. I think we are going to count dogs for our number. So a slight deviation in plan, but we're still staying on track that I'm doing some exertion activity today, and we're gonna get a number for a book today. So I will show you pictures of the dogs. This is something where it's good because it's very out of my control. How many dogs will be there is wildly varies. How many people show up to walk dogs wildly varies, so I have no clue walking in. I do know last time there were very few dogs, so I think we might get a really low number into those ancient TBR 2012 selections even, so we'll see. Stitch is barely a dog. All right. I am certain it's barely off the screen, but number 8 is going to be very ancient TBR. So this will be really interesting to see what it was. So number 8 is A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. Very funny. I was just talking with Dia about a different Madeleine L'Engle, Dia of Novel Idea. And a Wrinkle in Time is kind of almost a modern classic in sort of middle grade fantasy now, and I have not read it. Very much missed out on this as in its time. I missed out on it because it was very, very viewed as like literally teaching children Satanism, pretty much in the circles that I was growing up in. But I have seen the movie that came out more recently and really enjoyed that. So I'm really curious about this one because I've seen the movie, so I know the general story, but I've heard such wonderful and fantastic things about the book that I'm glad to have it thrust in my face after more than 10 years here. I was able to once again get the entire first chapter read via Libby's read a sample rather than borrowing the book, so that was good. I am even more surprised, I think, now that I haven't read this previously. So the first chapter really is very introductory. We're getting a sense of place. And right out of the gate, I wish I could read a little snippet of it here, but I'm reading the sample on my phone and I'm filming on my phone, so I'm not going to do that. But it's really descriptive. You're jumping right in that it's a stormy night and getting descriptions of the setting and the storm and the way the weather is behaving. And it's just so immersive. And in children's writing, that is less common, I would say, but it's not challenging to read. So this is easy to read, but it's not simple or plain, is what I would say. It's really just lush. So I like that aspect. We're introduced to the characters Meg and Charles Wallace primarily, along with their family. They seem very much tight as a family unit. And Dad is, for some reason, not there. And we don't really get any information why, and they don't know why. The kids don't. I think Meg was a really interesting character to me, jumping right in. She immediately is kind of talking down about herself, and she and Charles Wallace seem a little closer than their other siblings. So they have a pair of twins as another pair of siblings, but they seem closer, and they seem to be non-neurotypical as well. She recalls back, like she's kind of putting herself down about her intelligence and also her looks, and immediately people jump on correcting her and telling her that that's not right, actually. Like, specifically, she's recalling her dad talking up her being at her own pace, both her and Charles Wallace, and that they're not dumb, they just are going at their own pace. And like there's facts around this because your mother and I have done tests on you, and so we have verifiable evidence that you're not. And so they talk about IQ tests and things like that. So she seems to have above average IQ, but is not going through sort of typical milestones as expected. So that's very interesting to have that overtly in a book of this time. So that kind of surprised me, and I didn't realize that was going to be in the book. But otherwise, very compelling. I think the only major thing that happened, or not major, nothing major happened in the first chapter, but the only noteworthy thing that happened is Charles Wallace has befriended someone named Mrs. Whatsit. And that friend is living in a derelict house, a little ways away from where they live, and he's not supposed to have been going out there, and nobody knew he was going to visit her, but now they find out, and so they all sort of traipse over there and talk to Mrs. Whatsit and see what's going on. So that's the main happening, and it's kind of funny. So I really like this because it's poignant, it's insightful, it's funny, and it's really, really well written, like all within the first chapter that was probably like 20 pages. Really impressed, really, really impressed by this one. Today is a short interval sprints workout, so we're gonna have to total across the 3 machines that I'm doing sprints on. our total is 216. Okay, we're looking for number 216. Looks like it is The Prey of Gods by Nicky Drayden. I know like Nicky Drayden and Cameron Hurley, I think, have very similar styles in being very like action-packed, I think, near future sci-fi. So interesting, this is another sci-fi and this is another near future. I think all three that we've gotten so far are near future. And this one I think is maybe in Africa, but I don't remember for sure. And obviously there is a robot, a cool looking robot on the front. So that is interesting to me, but I don't remember anything about the plot of this one. But it is an author I've meant to read for a really long time and have not. So that's exciting for me, a completely new exposure. And we will see what I think. Rue decided to join us this time for Prey of Gods, so I was able to get the book on Hoopla. Both the ebook and audiobook are there, though they don't have a sample option, it seems like. So I've just used one of my borrows to get the ebook. And also interesting, this book seems to be the first one that clearly indicates there are more than one perspective, because we get the character name with the chapter heading. So in the first chapter, the character that we're with is a teenage boy who is Xhosa and is facing a coming of age sort of celebration or ceremony. He's very trepidatious because that seems to involve circumcision, genital mutilation. And so he's really nervous about that and is concerned. And also it's a big deal for his family and they're celebrating and they're roasting a goat specifically, and that comes up, but he's vegan. So he doesn't want to speak out against that. So there's a clear sense of conflict with tradition that he's feeling. But in the process of this chapter, we get some interactions between him and a family member who is doing this goat roasting, and the care that's there, that's being put into this for him, is really present, but him feeling really conflicted. So I like that emotional, that internal aspect was really great. There's also an interaction with a friend, potential romantic interest, who he goes to see, and they do drugs, which sort of helps him get calmed down a little bit about what's going to happen. But also, the friend thinks he's turning into a porpoise, and he starts to think he's turning into a crab. I'm guessing that's not real, or it's clearly a futuristic drug. This is definitely sci-fi and near future. Right now it feels like it could be far future, but I think it's near future. They also have these little technology devices that are kind of behaving like phones for them. That's how they communicated. It's giving them information, but they're actually little bots. So they're also kind of like a pet, and they're friendly with each other, which is really interesting. The main character is consistently upset that his friend is not treating his bot very nicely. And his friend's like, well, I have a warranty. Why does it matter? So I think his empathy is really shining through there as well. So I don't know what to think of this, mainly because I feel like it's going to need a lot of world building. And I also would contrast this up against Little Brother a bit, because we're also in a teen perspective. I feel like the voice was very casual and very in your face. But here we're not getting a lot of overt world building. The world building is sort of happening, but background, so I feel like I don't still have a grasp on it or what the technology is. So interesting and curious, but I'm less sure about this one. And it definitely seems really intriguing what's going on here. And I kind of connected with the character very quickly, I think. So I think that is the strength for this one. Anyway, onward. Well, tomorrow's a rest day, so today we are doing a long, low and slow elliptical cardio workout. The machines max out at 60 minutes though, so we're gonna total 2 sessions. And our total is 607. Here we go to 607. Way down. This is going to take forever. Oh, nice. We got a nonfiction that's great for mixing things up, but I am pretty sure this is on the list because someone mentioned it. And I am not sure who, but I think maybe Emily Fox read this and talked about it. But the book is Sex Matters: How Male-Centric Medicine Endangers Women's Health and What We Can Do About It by Alison J. McGregor. So that's a topic I'm quite interested in, and especially the what we can do about it part. So really intrigued to try this one out. I'm kind of looking down to minimize the glare here, so apologies if I'm kind of acting weird. I'm not trying to, I just don't want you staring at a glare in my glasses. So anyway, I was able to get Sex Matters yet again on Libby. This has gone really well because this Goodreads list has a lot of very, very niche things, and I was expecting we would run into at least one thing that was hard to get access to or I'd have to buy. We have not, so go us. So anyway, I read the introduction and chapter 1 in the sample of this book, and that was 40 pages. So the longest of all of these samples, and I really liked it. I think it was fantastic. We are with an author who is a medical doctor. I was kind of expecting this to be more sociology, and it's not. So that does kind of read in the text. You can tell you're getting really detailed aspects. So it maybe feels a little dry, but not to the point it's like an academic text at all. You feel the expertise of the person that is writing. I think that's where I would go with that. So we are introduced to her pursuing medicine and wanting to pursue the idea of the female body holistically in health, and everyone kind of just pushing her toward or not understanding that she doesn't mean reproductive organ health when she's saying that, and just kind of being baffled that no one understands. So that gap in coverage. And then in chapter 1, she introduces or continues to pursue the topic and expose us to the topic through an anecdote and some wider information of cases she's personally experienced, and then more broadly, the issues of the fact that research and testing are very, very focused on male bodies and haven't really included other genders' bodies in order to kind of establish norms. So all of the norms are based off of male bodies, and so you get things that are reported incorrectly, things that are not taken in as a norm for a female body that is actually a norm for a female body. And she talked about just how often female bodies reporting symptoms that are very typical of females are listed as unusual or atypical presentations of something. One of the most horrifying things I think that came up was that I would like to think that hysteria as a diagnosis and like women being put in asylums over actual problems is over. And yet the author brings up that women are very much more highly referred for psychiatric consults or given psychiatric diagnosis for actual physical problems, where men with the same symptoms are referred for tests, for further testing and analysis as a health issue. And so there are echoes of that still there in medicine. And that's horrifying. So yeah, it was really compelling, really good reading, and yet also horrifying. So I think with that, we're wrapped up here now. I guess I was thinking I might need to film a separate wrap up, but I don't think I do. I think we can just close it out. So where I'm going with this out of the books that I read, I think that we found I am much more vibing with things that I can sort of lay back on the soft bed of the prose and sink into sort of rich prose, whereas the other fiction that was hitting me in the face with the voice of the character was not working for me as well in this moment. And also Sex Matters, I think I'm really, really interested in, but also it was just very hard reading right in this moment as well. So I enjoyed all of the books. I think I want to read all of these books. I didn't cross anything off of my TBR, which is fine. That was not the goal of this project. But I did find that I'm really leaning strongly toward A Wrinkle in Time and Fall or Dodge in Hell. And the other 3, I feel like are for later. And I have a good sense of the tone. And those are tones that I kind of have to be, well, the 2 fiction, I have to be in specific moods for those type of voices because they're a little bit more bombastic and in your face. And Sex Matters, I'm going to need to have some emotional fortitude to go into, I think. But I am very, very interested in the topic. So it's going to need the right time. And now I kind of know that. And so I can select the right time for it to dive in. So I would say this was a wholehearted success. This was exactly what I wanted out of this try a chapter, was to kind of sort things, filter, and figure out when is going to be the right time to get to these and have them a little bit more forefront on my TBR, that I have sort of touched them and not just set them in the nebulous TBR forever. So I hope you enjoyed this. This was kind of a weird project. I don't know. I feel like not a lot of people do try chapters very often anymore. They used to be very popular. And also most people are using them to try and knock things off of their TBR and get rid of them. And that's not really what I'm doing here. I'm just trying to sort and prioritize because I need better prioritization. So with that, this was a success. I'm very happy with this. And I haven't decided yet, but I think probably I will put either Fall or A Wrinkle in Time on my February TBR. So we will see if I decide to do that. And with that, I will say thank you so very much for watching.